Good morning, one and all. So today I'm going to discuss about water activity and its significance in food items. So as you all know, what is water activity and how it is different from the moisture content. Now, if we see, moisture content is the water which is available in the food item, that is called as moisture content. But water activity is the how the water reacts with the microorganism, or how the water gets involved in any chemical reaction. So basically, water activity is the it defines the activity of the water which is present in the food sample, and moisture content is the amount of the water which is present in the food sample. That is the difference between moisture content and the water activity. So water activity is a thermodynamic property which is defined as the ratio of vapor pressure of water in a food system and the vapor pressure of pure water at the same temperatures. So water activity is the amount of the unbound water in the sample. So this is the difference, that it is the unbound water, not the bound water. Now there are two types of waters in the food sample: bound water and unbound water. Now bound water is the water which is binds to the molecules of the food sample, whereas unbound water is the free flowing water in the food samples. So this unbound water is easily available for the microorganisms to grow on it. So water that is not bound to the ingredients themselves can be used by the unwanted microorganism, which could lead to one of the contributing factors for food spoilage. So the formula for water activity is AW is equal to P divided by PO. So P is the vapor pressure of the water in the sample, whereas PO is the vapor pressure of the pure water. So vapor pressure is nothing but it is the tendency of the water to convert into a vapor state or a gaseous state. The more the unbound water, more will be the microbial spoilage. Now, if there is more of this unbound water or water activity in the food, then there is more chances that the microorganism will grow. So in this graph you can see, now usually the water activity can be described from 0 scale to 1 scale. So this is the water activity scale. So it is if it is 0, that means no water, and if it is 1, means it is pure water. So the water activity of pure water is 1. So in this graph you can see where there is no water, that means there is less of bacteria. But as the water activity increases, as the scale is increased towards pure water, you will see that the microbial spoilage can be more. So this means that more the water activity, more will be the microbial spoilage, or you can say the more the unbound water, more will be the microbial spoilage. So this is the water activity scale. It starts from 0. 0 means no water. That means water activity is 0 to 1. because one is the water activity of pure water. So the pure water has a water activity of 1. So free water in fruits and vegetables is the water available for chemical reactions to support the microbial growth and to act as a transporting media for the compounds. So this unbound water in any fruits or vegetables, it helps in the all the chemical reactions which takes place in the food item, or to support the microbial growth, or it also acts as a transporting medium for the certain compounds within the fruits or vegetables. Now there exists a relationship between an equilibrium relative humidity, which is called as ERH, and water activity. Now what is this ERH? So ERH is defined as the relative humidity of the air surrounding the food at which the product is in equilibrium with the environment. So this is the relative humidity which surrounds the food. So the relative humidity of the air which surrounds the food at which the product is in equilibrium. That means the equilibrium means the relative humidity in the air surrounding the food is same to that of the humidity inside the food item. That is called as equilibrium. So it will neither gain the moisture nor lose its moisture, because the equilibrium is already maintained to that of the surrounding humidity. So there is nothing to gain or lose over here, because both the environments, that is inside the food and outside the food, is the same environment. So equilibrium is maintained. So the moisture can neither be lost nor gained. A saturated solution of sodium chloride has a water activity of 0.755, and this same concentration of solution in a closed container will develop an equilibrium relative humidity in a headspace of 55.5%. So this is kind of an experiment to see the relationship between the water activity and the ERH. Okay, so it is said that a sodium chloride solution which has a water activity of 0.755, so the water activity of the sodium chloride solution is 0.755. Okay, so that we can consider as the internal environment, whereas the outer environment is the relative humidity of ERH, that is 55.5%. So the 55.5% is equilibrium to 0.755 water activity of sodium chloride. So that is how you can say that the equilibrium is maintained. That is kind of a standard. So hence the relationship of the same vapor pressure is given as, so hence a formula is given which depicts the relationship between water activity as well as the with the ERH, that is water activity is equal to ERH divided by 100. Now this water activity also increases with the rise in the temperature. Now what is this water activity? As I told you, water activity is the unbound water which is present in any food samples. Okay, so now if this water activity can rise with the rise in temperature. For example, if you keep any fruit which has the water activity of 0.55, suppose. Okay, so if you keep this in any conditions wherein the temperature are slightly high, then there are chances that the water activity can increase. So from 0.55 it can increase to, it can show a little bit increase in the water activity as the temperature increases. Now foods with water activity around 0.95. Now when we say water activity of 0.95, that means that particular food has very much high water activity, because according to the scale, 1 is the highest point in the water activity, whereas 0 is the lowest point in the water activity. So 0.95 will be somewhere here. So that is like the highest amount of water activity in those foods, which will be more prone to the microbial growth. So foods with water activity around 0.95 or more provide sufficient moisture to support the growth of the spoilage organism, including bacteria, yeast or molds, because that is the highest number of water activity. That's why it can support the growth of either bacteria, yeast or mold. Because the growth of the water activity which is required for the bacteria to grow is slightly more as compared to the yeast and molds. So most of the spoilage causing organisms grow in a specific moisture conditions, and thus is referred to as a critical water activity, below which growth cannot occur. So for the spoilage of the microorganisms to occur also, the water activity should be in that particular range. So if it is below the range of the spoilage organisms to grow, then it is considered as a critical water activity. For example, yeast and molds has a water activity of around 0.40 to around 0.55 or till 0.65. So at that particular range, yeast and mold will grow, whereas bacteria will grow at around 0.75 to 0.95 water activity. So you can say that the critical water activity point can be 0.30, because at that particular point no bacteria or yeast or mold can grow, because it has to be above 0.30. So this is just an example, but yeah, that is how what it is meant when we say critical water point. That is the least point at which a microorganism can grow. Now, significance of water activity. So it predicts which microorganism will be potential source of spoilage and infection. So water activity can depict at which water activity which are the organisms which can spoil that particular food. Now the water activity, for example, if the water activity is around 0.40 to 0.60, that means it is obvious that either yeast or mold can grow at that particular water activity. If it is around 0.80 or 0.90, then you can say okay, bacteria can grow. So it can easily depict which microorganisms can grow at that particular water activity. Second one, it maintains the chemical stability of the food. So it maintains the chemical reactions, whatever reactions which takes place in the food, it maintains the chemical reactions of the food, because water is another source for the any reactions to takes place. The third one is it minimizes the non-enzymatic browning reaction and spontaneous autocatalytic lipid oxidation reaction. So here it stops the non-enzymatic browning reaction. Now non-enzymatic browning reactions are the enzyme related reactions. For example, the enzymes reacts in certain foods, the enzyme starts reacting. Okay, so these are called as the enzymatic reactions and non-enzymatic reactions. So it will minimize the non-enzymatic reaction, browning reaction, and the spontaneous lipid oxidation reactions. How? Because for lipid oxidation there is formation of water molecules in their mechanism. So if there is no availability of the water, that means less of the reactions, lipid oxidation reactions can happen. So it prolongs the activity of the enzymes and vitamins in the food. So it helps in the activities of the enzymes and the vitamins in the food. Also it optimizes the physical properties of the food such as texture and shelf life. So also it helps in the prediction of the or sustaining the physical properties of the food. Like how if there is more of this water, unbound water, then what will happen? Obviously the texture will be lost, right? Or the shelf life will be less, because more of the water is available for the growth of the microorganisms. So it helps in optimizing these conditions. So if it is less of water, that means more of the texture, more of the shelf life. More of water activity, that means less of the shelf life, less of the texture. So it helps in the it helps in prediction of such reactions. Now okay, so now let's speak about the microbial degradation. So microbial degradation is nothing but, you can say, the degradation which is caused by the microorganisms. So microbial spoilage is caused by the microorganisms like fungi, molds, yeast and bacteria. So how this microbes attacks the food and causes degradation of the food items. So they spoil the food by growing in it and producing the substances that change the color, texture and odor of the food. So as I told you, this microorganism will develop only on those only on those substances which can give them the nutrients which required for their growth, right? So they will grow and they will start producing certain substances. Now these are the substances which causes the deterioration in the texture or the quality of that particular food material. So this compounds will change the colors, the texture of the food or the odor, the smell of the food. So eventually the food will be unfit for the human consumption. So those foods, the spoiled foods by the microorganism, those cannot be consumed. It will be unfit for their consumption. So when food is covered with a furry growth or becomes soft and it smells bad, the spoilage is caused by the growth of the molds and yeast. Now molds and yeast, you can easily identify the growth because there will be formation of certain substances like soft cottony structures on the food or fruits or vegetables. So you can easily identify that the growth is by the molds and yeast. So microbial spoilage by molds and yeast includes souring of the milk. So such good examples is souring of the milk, then growth of mold on the bread or the rotting of fruits and vegetables. So these organisms are rarely harmful to humans, but bacterial contamination is often more dangerous because the food does not always look bad, but it is severely infected. Now, in yeast and molds, we can identify easily whether the food material is damaged by yeast or mold. But when it comes to bacterial, it is little bit difficult because sometimes it will affect the food, but we won't be able to recognize because there won't be any outer change in the food, but the food will be affected. Sometimes it can be taste in terms of bacteria, but sometimes you won't get to know, and that is why we get that food poisoning, because we have consumed certain foods which was infected by the bacteria and we are not aware of it. We will get to know later once we get the symptoms of loose motion or diarrhea or stomach pain. That is when we will get to know, okay, that whatever food we had consumed, it was affected by bacteria. But yeast and mold, in this case, we can easily identify because they will grow on the food substance and it was easily visible for our eyes and we can identify it. So when microorganisms get access to food, they utilize the nutrients found in it and their numbers will rapidly increase. So what these microorganisms do, as they land on the surface of certain foods, they will start utilizing the nutrients of that particular food which is required for their growth, and they will increase in numbers. As I told you, these microorganisms will only grow on those substances which will provide them with the nutrients. It won't grow on those substances which does not provide them with the nutrients. So they change the food's flavor and synthesizes new compounds that can be harmful to human health. So after the growth, they will change the flavor, the texture, the color of that particular food, and also they will produce these harmful compounds which can be harmful to the human health. Food spoilage directly affects the color, taste, odor, consistency or texture of the food, and it becomes dangerous to eat. The presence of the bad odor or smell coming from the food is an indication that it may be unsafe. The second one is autolytic degradation. Now, autolytic degradation is actually caused by the enzyme, so it is actually an enzymatic degradation. So here the enzymes will cause certain foods to degrade. Now from these enzymes, are the inbuilt enzymes or the enzymes are already present in that particular food which causes the degradation. Now certain enzymes are in the food are is advantageous, whereas some have disadvantages. Now one good example of the enzyme being advantageous is the fruits goes through the ripening stage, right? Now this ripening stage is because of the enzymes which is present in that particular food. Like banana, right, it will immediately ripen. Why? Because of the enzymes which is present, ethylene, okay, the compound. So that is because of that it will start ripening fast, okay. So that is because of the enzyme. Now certain enzymes will contribute in the spoilage of that particular fruits or vegetables. So it will cause the deterioration of certain of the food materials. Now again, it depends on the conditions at which these enzymes will be activated, and we have to find out those conditions to keep the food preserved for a longer period of time. Now autolytic degradation, every living organism uses specialized proteins called as enzymes to drive the chemical reaction in its cells. So these enzymes are nothing but these are the proteins which helps in all the chemical reactions which takes place inside the cell. So after that, enzymes play a role in decomposition of one's living tissues in the process called as autolysis, that is self-destruction or enzymic spoilage. So now if you see in living organisms also, even after immediate death, how your body degrades. Now your body will degrade right after your death. How is that possible? Because of the enzymes which is present in the body, it will start degrading our body. That is a good example. Even in the fruits, it's the same process. Certain enzymes will degrade the body of the fruits or vegetables. For example, some enzymes in tomato help it to ripen, but other enzymes causes it to decay. So one enzymic spoilage is underway. It produces the damage to the tomato skin, so mold can begin to attack it as well, speeding the process of delay. So once this enzymes starts degrading the any food or any fruit or vegetables, in this case they have given the example of tomato. So what happens, once the enzyme starts degrading, the molds will come and attack, and thus it will fasten the process of degradation. So you can see here, this is the fresh tomato, the enzymes which helps it to ripen, and in the second picture you can see the tomato in which the enzyme present in it helps in the degradation process. The third degradation is oxidative degradation. Now oxidative degradation usually happens in those foods which has this fat content in it. Usually this oxidative degradation is also called as lipid peroxidation. So it is nothing but the breakdown of this fatty acid. So here what happens, oxidation is nothing but it is the, in simple terms, it is the loss of electron. So it is a chain reaction that occurs in the presence of oxygen and is responsible for the deterioration in the quality of the food product, including of flavors and of odors. So this oxidation takes place in the presence of oxygen. Now how it takes place in the presence of oxygen? Because there are certain compounds in the food items which strive for an oxygen molecule. Now these compounds are called as free radicals. Okay, so once these free radicals take up the oxygen from any source, maybe the environmental source, what will happen, these free radicals will be activated and it will start the degradation process of that particular food item. So it is affected by the processing, packaging and storing methods as well as product ingredients. Now antioxidants delay the onset of the oxidation by donating the hydrogen atom to quench the free radical. Forming a stable antioxidant radical that is unstable to participate in the propagation reaction, slowing down the oxidation. So what happens in this case is that the antioxidant, now as I told you, there are certain compounds in the food items which strive for the oxygen atom, right? And this oxygen atom can be available from the environment, okay, the outer oxygen which we say. So that is why we keep the fatty food in a packed containers. Why? Because it shouldn't come in contact with the oxygen. Why? Because these free radicals which are present in that food item, it will take up the oxygen molecule from the air and it will be activated, thus causing the undesirable compounds and thus causing the off flavors and off smell and odor. Now how to stop this oxidation? By using an antioxidant. Now what this antioxidant will do, antioxidant will take up the oxygen. So the antioxidant in any food item, what they will do, they will take up this so what the antioxidation the antioxidants, they will give its hydrogen molecule to the oxygen which is present in the air, and it will form a water molecule, and it will give away the oxygen atom. So thus there won't be any oxygen atoms available for the free radicals to target on, thus slowing down the oxidation reaction. Now here is the oxidative degradation of the lipids. So here it is nothing but degradation is due to the loss of electrons, and this degradation of lipids only happen in PUFA, that is polyunsaturated fatty acid. Okay, now why it happens in polyunsaturated fatty acid? Because of the methylene bridge. Now this is an example of polyunsaturated fatty acid. Now this polyunsaturated fatty acid contains double bonds. It will contain multiple double bonds. Okay, and because of this multiple double bonds, there are possibilities of the methylene bridge. So this is called as methylene bridge. Okay, this occurs only in the polyunsaturated fatty acids. Now this is where, now if you substitute this particular methylene bridge, what you will get is C, H and H. Okay, that is the elaborated form of this particular structure. So now what will happen, this free radical which strives for an oxygen molecule, this free radical, one example of free radical is 0H with a dot on top. So this is the example of free radical. Now how this free radical will come in contact with this polyunsaturated fatty acid? So this free radical 0 plus 0H plus the hydrogen atom of the polyunsaturated fatty acid will combine, thus giving out the water molecule. Okay, so the free radical will take up the hydrogen atom of the polyunsaturated fatty acid and it will form a water molecule. Now there are 3 steps for lipid peroxidation, that is initiation, wherein the attack of the free radical, that is ROS, on the lipid. So the free radical will attack the polyunsaturated fatty acid, that is called as the initiation step. Then second one is propagation step, wherein the fatty acid radical reacts with the oxygen molecule from the air, that is called as propagation step. And third one is termination step, when 2 radicals reacts together. Now this is the mechanism, oxidation mechanism. So here you have seen a polyunsaturated fatty acid. So polyunsaturated fatty acid, why they are used? Because of the multiple double bonds which are present, which will give rise to a methylene bridge. The methylene bridge is nothing but C connected to 2 hydrogen, a carbon atom connected to 2 hydrogen molecules, here one and one more is here. So now the free radical will, that is HO, will go and attack this hydrogen atom and it will form the water molecule. This reaction is called as initiation reaction. The second one is propagation reaction. So we get the end product, that is a free radical here. So this is called as a lipid radical compound. Now this will act with the oxygen molecule from the air, that is the O2 molecule, and this O2 will go and attack the lipid radical here, and it will give two oxygen molecules with one unstable radical. So this is called as a lipid peroxyl radical. This structure is called as lipid peroxyl radical. So this is the now this lipid peroxyl radical will go and attack the another unsaturated fatty acid. So this lipid peroxyl radical will attack the another unsaturated fatty acid. So what it will do, it will give a lipid peroxide along with one more lipid radical. Now if you see, this methylene bridge will combine with the two oxygen molecules, thus giving you a lipid peroxide and also one lipid radical. So this is a propagation step. The third one is termination step, wherein these two lipid radicals which we got from the second step, that is the propagation step, those will react with each other and will form a peroxide. So these are the three important steps, that is initiation, propagation and termination. Thank you.